So we'll be talking about AI and how it's shaping chronic disease management. So chronic diseases are long-standing illnesses that tend to progress over time. But what if we can diagnose the illness before you even have symptoms? So today we're going to talk about what AI is doing in cardiology, in neurology, and we'll learn about oculomics. So traditionally, the EKG, we look at the rate. It can tell us the rhythm if you're actively in atrial fibrillation. It tells us if you're having a heart attack and some electrolyte imbalances. But what happens if we add AI to reading an EKG? So AI, if we use machine learning algorithms and we use pattern recognitions using CNNs, we can see so much more than the human eye can see. What can it do? Well, I told you what the traditional EKG can do. Now, with AI, we can determine the ejection fraction, which tells us about heart failure. Not been able to do this before. We would have to do a dedicated echocardiogram to find out this information. We can predict the development of atrial fibrillation, not just diagnose it when you're in it, but we can actually predict it before it happens. Really amazing. We can detect the presence of diabetes, hypertension, chronic kidney disease, and anemia, even before getting a blood test. So this is a study that's actually proving that AI can read the ECG and diagnose heart failure. So heart failure is the end result of a heart's structural heart disease. It's the heart's hardware, and this is the end result. So there's about 64 million people in the world that have heart failure. So in the article that I showed you, they developed a model called EchoNext, and it was trained on 1 million images, including EKGs and echocardiograms. And what it found was area under the curve was 0.91, and that means anything that's close to 1 is a really good number. So this is a very good study. And it's important because if we know the disease earlier, we can change the trajectory, and we can actually decrease mortality. So in this study, we'll switch now to what can AI do for coronary calcium screening? And this was a study that was done at VA hospitals. So why do we even look at coronary screening? It's not done routinely, but if it is done, it can help us with cardiovascular diseases and determining atherosclerosis, which can lead to, as we all know, MI, stroke, death. So the opportunistic part of this article, what does that mean? Well, we do chest CTs for many reasons, and at the VA, there were a lot of chest CTs that were done. There's two types of chest CTs. They're non-gated and gated. Non-gated is what I'll say maybe the usual CT scan that we have done. Gated is going to be a dedicated scan to look for your coronary calcium, and it's very labor intensive, and there's more radiation involved, and it has to be with the still phase of the heart. So there's not a lot of those that are laying around, but at the VA they had all the non-gated ones. Said, well, let's make use of it, and let's take the opportunity. So in other words, the opportunistic angle of this article was doing something on these non-gated scans that we never did before. So what did we find? Well, we were able to find an accuracy of 87 to 89% for identifying your coronary calcium score. And it ended up with free risk screening because the scans were already done and no additional imaging, contrast, or radiation. So right now, we've been able to predict some illnesses before they even happen. But what happens if we're able to diagnose some illnesses right from your own home? So let's look at Apple Watches. So from the Apple Watch, a few things that it can do with chronic diseases is detect hypertension, sleep apnea, and atrial fibrillation. So the Apple Watch and hypertension, what it does is it has been approved for hypertension notification features. And what this feature does is it alerts the user to the possibility of having hypertension. So hypertension is very important because there's 1.4 billion adults worldwide with hypertension and 210 million at advanced stages. So why is it at advanced stages when we actually find it? And it's because it's the silent killer. So for years, you can have a high reading. Let's say maybe your blood pressure is 150, 160. Maybe none of the doctors think that that's really that high and you don't have to do anything or you don't have follow-up. Well, for years, you have this long-standing mild hypertension, and it takes its toll on you in the heart, behind the eyes, in the brain, in the kidneys, and peripheral vascular. So you can end up with strokes and heart attack, hypertensive retinopathy, chronic kidney disease, aneurysms, and atherosclerosis. So very important disease that we don't want to miss. So usually we take the blood pressure with the blood pressure cuff, but when you have the wearable, it doesn't work that way. The hypertension notifications come from the PPG, which is a photoplasmography, and it measures how light bounces off of your blood vessels, and it uses AI and machine learning and recognition patterns. The end result then is you'll get these alerts, and then you can share the information with your doctor. Next, let's look at AI and atrial fibrillation. So globally, 52 million people are living with atrial fibrillation in 2021. By age 55 to 60, the remaining lifetime risk approaches 33%. Unfortunately, what this means is the longer you live, the increased risk you have for developing atrial fibrillation. So this is an article trying to prove that the Apple Watch can detect atrial fibrillation. So I mentioned that the standard for checking for atrial fibrillation was just the plain EKG. In this study, they used over 4,000 patients with a mean age of 62. And you want to look at a study that has somebody maybe in the ages of 62, because if the study was done on younger people, it won't even matter because most young people don't even have atrial fibrillation. So it was a good study, I think, because of the age. And if you look at the statistics, the sensitivity, meaning how well did it detect disease? Great, 94%. Specificity, which is also important. How well did it rule out disease? 95%. That's great. Area under the curve tests for accuracy, and anything close to 1, this 0.96 is great. So a really good study proving that AI really can detect atrial fibrillation on the watches. Now let's talk about AI and sleep apnea. Just take a second and look at each side of you and look at the person next to you, just for 1 second. If anyone's sleeping or snoring, it may be from possibly one of two things. Either me, which I hope it's not, or the possibility of sleep apnea. So if anyone's sleeping, give them a little nudge because they might want to hear this. So in this study, it was a study used to detect sleep apnea from inertial measurement units and not necessarily going to a sleep lab and having to stay overnight to do the test, or there are some home monitors that can test. This is much easier. This was a pilot study. So obstructive sleep apnea. It looks at two things, apnea, which is when you stop breathing, and then hypopnea, which is a shallow, ineffective breathing. But believe it or not, 80% of sleep apnea cases remain undiagnosed. And why is that important? Because there's significant morbidity as a result of OSA undiagnosed, hypertension, heart failure, atrial fibrillation, everything we've been talking about so far, chronic kidney disease, mood disorders, etc. So it's a multi-system chronic disease risk amplifier, so very important. So if your loved one is snoring or your friends are snoring, they might need to get checked out. So it's the IMU units that measure, it's an electronic sensor that measures motion and orientation, and they used algorithm machine learning models to do this. The results, 100% sensitivity, pretty good test. So all the true positives who were proven to have sleep apnea were positive in this study, and 90% specificity. So people without disease were correctly classified as not having disease. So right now, we'll switch to artificial intelligence and neurology, specifically Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. So Parkinson's disease, it's a loss of dopaminergic neurons in the brain. Estimated 10 million people are living with PD. Men are 1.5 times more likely than women and over age 65. So some of the common symptoms: tremors, constipation, bradykinesia, sleep disorders, but three that I want to focus on today. And it's mask-like facies or hypomimia. So it's a flat affect. The other is decreased blinking. And the other one is voice alterations or hypophonia. So we'll look at a few studies. This was a study trying to diagnose Parkinson's disease using smile videos. And with smiling, you're using muscles. So with Parkinson's, the muscles are affected. So they used an online tool to record themselves. And there were three facial expressions: smile, disgust, and surprise. With machine learning models, they were trained on these features to be able to diagnose Parkinson's. So this test is a specificity of 91% and a negative predictive value of 92%. So it's a good test, but mostly it was It was really good for ruling out the disease, and I would say fair for ruling in the disease because the sensitivity and positive predictive value are in the 70s. So it's well suited for ruling out the disease, and the authors do admit that further research is needed, but it's a pretty good start. Next is a voice analysis for diagnosing Parkinson's disease. So it used AI and machine learning to analyze the voices to detect early signs, which is important, early signs of PD. So what they found was a high diagnostic performance, 91% accuracy for predicting it. Area under the curve, close to 1 at 0.91. But the limitation was, it's a good study, but the limitation was just that it was a smaller study. So larger studies may be needed. Next is eye movement, eyelid movement specifically. So with this, computer vision was used in deep learning neural networks. There were video recordings of the eye movements. The specificity was 91%, so very good at ruling out the disease, and sensitivity low to moderate for ruling in the disease. So with this, we've gone over several things and how AI is impacting chronic illnesses. And I want to end with a small story. It's a case about a 67-year-old gentleman who had progressive weakness, and he progressed to severe weakness where he had to be hospitalized. He was almost immobile at that time. And the immobility kept progressing to the point where he could not even eat anymore. So he went to the hospital. He was seen by several specialists, and they determined that he was just getting older and he was deconditioned. So they put him through rehab, vigorous rehab, and to no avail because he did not improve. So the family was very upset, took him out of this hospital, actually went to another state, took him to a different hospital, and on day one, he was started on a medication and diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So this patient was my father. I didn't learn about Parkinson's at that time, but learned a lot since that time. And it takes many years sometimes to diagnose Parkinson's disease. Now, probably all of you have seen the little person in the grocery store who has the shuffling gait, who has a stooped posture, and maybe the resting tremor. That's easy to diagnose Parkinson's at that time. But I'm very passionate about Parkinson's because of my father, and I'm thrilled that that AI is able to diagnose it much sooner, because by the time you have these outward symptoms, a lot of damage is done. So I'm thrilled if we can diagnose it much sooner. So now, what if we had a crystal ball that could tell us even more about our own illnesses? Well, luckily we all have two, and they're called your eyes. So I'm going to let my esteemed colleague, Dr. Spiceman, tell you about this.
So we're going to learn about something called oculomics. And the term oculomics is fairly new. You may not have heard of it. But it's not about diagnosing diseases of the eye. It's about what Ann just mentioned, using the eye or pictures of the eye as a way to look inside your body and detect other chronic diseases. But what's exciting about this is detecting it years before you will ever have signs or symptoms, allowing physicians to prevent diseases before they happen. And this really is going to be the future of medicine. And I'm so really excited to tell you about it. So this study looked at detecting Alzheimer's disease early, very early, before you would even know you have it, by just an image of the eye, using the retina as a biomarker. So not only in Alzheimer's disease, but in Parkinson's as well, we can tell from images of the eye using artificial intelligence whether someone will develop Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease. And this is really important here. 6 to 7 years before they would ever have symptoms or go to a doctor. And this can be done just by an image of the eye. Now, it could be a retinal photograph, or in ophthalmology, they also do another image of the eye called optical coherence tomography. And I have to tell you that the UK has been really instrumental in pioneering AI work through something called UK Biobank, which physicians have access to this data to do research on. And Ann and I do a lot of research in artificial intelligence in medicine. But specifically, this UK Biobank data, which was published in the journal Neurology, was looking at Parkinson's. And in this study, they could diagnose Parkinson's by this optical coherence tomography 7.3 years before patients would otherwise have a diagnosis made. Now, this is amazing. And the potential to impact on patient care is tremendous. Going back to Ann's story, if we could find these diseases before patients have symptoms, our ability to really be difference makers as the physicians can really transform. So this whole idea I told you is called oculomics, or the eye serving as the window to the health of the entire body. So how it's done? You're like, how is this done? Well, the picture in orange is what we would normally see with the human eye. If I look in someone's eye, this is what it looks like if I use instruments. But doing the ocular coherence tomography, which you see in the black and white, we can define the thickness of various layers of the eye. And this is what artificial intelligence is looking at to detect these chronic diseases very early. So this was a nice review in JAMA Ophthalmology talking about this whole topic. And so the take home is, in the future, if you were to come to see Ann or myself as your primary doctor, all we need to do is take a picture of your eye, and we would know years before you ever develop disease, chronic diseases that we talked about today, that you're going to develop cardiovascular disease or diabetes or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or kidney disease. And we could start you on preventive treatment that would allow you to not have a bad outcome in your future, much like our previous speaker, which I thought was fantastic. Thanks for that previous. So autonomous AI really began with ophthalmology. Most of the original breakthroughs in artificial intelligence in medicine were done in the eye. And this example in Nature Digital Medicine was using artificial intelligence in a primary care doctor's office to diagnose diabetic retinopathy. And this was Dr. Abramoff at the University of Iowa. This has been fully deployed in many healthcare systems in the US. For example, Johns Hopkins has fully deployed this and has made a major impact on detecting diabetic retinopathy in the primary care setting. Now, Google, in a similar way, has done amazing work in this area, and they have deployed similar technology using artificial intelligence to read images of the eye all around the globe. In India, in Thailand, they've published this data in JAMA of how they were able to reach underserved people in rural areas and make a major impact on their health. So AI is really transforming medicine in an amazing way, and the eye is actually the window into your medical conditions. Ann and I mentor a lot of doctors in research in this regard, and some of our research projects have looked recently at preventing cardiovascular disease using the oculomics as a way. Now, this study, which was in the Journal of the American Medical Informatics Association last year, was about an AI tool called RetiCVD that used the eye to predict the development of cardiovascular disease. Similarly, in the kidney world, in Lancet Digital Health, the nephrologists were able to do this for chronic kidney disease from retinal photographs. And we recently hosted a meeting like the one you're at today in Chicago, a scientific session on artificial intelligence in medicine. One of the sessions was on kidney disease, and one of our speakers talked about this study. But we actually presented at our conference over 200 papers like the one I am showing you today on the ways that artificial intelligence can be used in medicine for all these different chronic diseases that we've discussed today. To the point where AI can be trained so well that we could avoid having to do biopsies on patients to diagnose various diseases like kidney diseases. So what did you learn today from our talk? What can you take back home when you leave Paris? Number one is that not only can AI interpret an EKG and tell about your heart, but AI can be trained to look at the EKG and diagnose congestive heart failure, atrial fibrillation, and also non-heart diseases outside the heart. It can read and detect diabetes, chronic kidney disease, anemia, and hypothyroidism. As Ann mentioned, AI can look at a CAT scan and detect coronary artery disease. And Apple, through these applications that are available to everyone on their Apple Watch, if you have a smartwatch, you can use your smartwatch right now, today, for your own health care to screen for and detect hypertension if you don't know you have it, atrial fibrillation if you don't know you have it, and obstructive sleep apnea. These diseases often go undetected for a very long time and eventually lead to a serious life-threatening problems like stroke or heart disease. So you're simply, by wearing a smartwatch, you can use these tools that Apple has now made available to all of us using AI to detect these chronic diseases. And the exciting future that is literally now is using oculomics to detect Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, 7 years before you would ever have a symptom or go to a doctor. So the future of medicine, what we're learning about at this conference, which I think has been fabulous, I've loved it, is that AI, it can be a screening tool in primary care. So next time you go for that annual visit that was mentioned earlier, we can now use that to detect disease far earlier, preventively, and also for treatment, as was discussed. And our hope is that we will reduce morbidity and mortality in millions of patients worldwide. This is already happening. If you find this interesting and you want to come to a conference like the one you're at now, we are hosting one again in October of 2026. Ann and I invite you to be our guests in Chicago for 2 full days of what you saw here today, the latest. All the new developments in 2026, we have world-renowned professors of medicine that will be speaking on every subspecialty in medicine. If you want to do some research or publishing around this area, we mentor a lot of projects. You can email me. If you want to become a member of our organization, we're a non-for-profit educational professional organization. Anyone that's interested in AI and healthcare, which is obviously everyone that's around us today, you're welcome to go to our website and become a member of our organization.
Hey everybody, John here. Thanks for listening to another episode. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, please check out our website at www.americancollegeaim.org. Sign up to become a member. Also, save the dates, October 9th and October 10th, 2026. We'll be back live in Chicago, Illinois at the McCormick Place Convention Center for our second annual live scientific session. Sign up at the website to attend. Until then, we'll see you all on the next Melvin Monday. Thanks for stopping by. See ya.